Hello, everyone, and welcome to the One Soccer Nation podcast. I'm your host, Kareem Rae. Today, I'm honored to be joined by a proven leader in global football, Rod Underwood. Rod has spent decades shaping the game as a head coach, technical director, academy architect, and sporting director across multiple professional clubs, including the Portland Timbers, Sacramento Republic, Montego Bay United, and Chattanooga FC. His methodologies, leadership philosophy, and holistic approach to building sustainable clubs have influenced organizations across the United States and around the world. Rod, thank you for being here. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing good. So the first question I want to ask you is, how did you get involved in the beautiful game?
Yeah, it was all by accident. At my age, it was basically I walked in school one day and there was a sign that says play soccer. And I said, okay. And that was kind of it. And I'd never really seen a ball, never really heard of the game, but I was at the age where I was interested in being active and playing sports. So yeah, and then, my mom was my first coach because there was nobody there to coach the team. And, really just was, a moment I fell in love with the game immediately.
Where did you grow up playing and what year was this?
I grew up in Atlanta, and I want to say this was probably 1973, maybe.
Nice.
Some of those.
Yeah, 1973 is some time ago. What soccer was in the United States, in Atlanta versus now, night and day. But can you share from your perspective what it was like growing up in that time and how you've seen the game evolve through time?
Yeah, the positive was I had some milestones. I was in a city that was a fairly decent sized city, and at the time we had all the sports teams. We had American football, we had the Falcons, we had the Braves, we had the Atlanta Hawks. So we always had sport around, and then we had an NASL team, the Atlanta Chiefs. So that was really those things really were important for us. And growing up, I was playing at the YMCA, and then probably it really wasn't club soccer till I probably got to high school. And then once we got there was a little bit not to the complexities of what we see today, but definitely there was some sort of club soccer that was going on. And then there weren't a ton of people playing, but the people that played, we enjoyed it. We loved it. There are guys that I'm still friends with today that either I played against or played in high school with or played club with that we're still friends today because it was such a small niche of individuals playing the game. And then, played through high school and went on to college and played in college.
Very nice. Did you ever attend the first World Cup or did you watch it on TV?
No, 94. I didn't attend any games in 94.
Did you get a chance to watch any of them on TV?
Yeah, I actually, the crazy thing was my first World Cup that I watched, I want to say was 1978. And so I was recording everything on VHS. And so games that I couldn't watch, I was recording on VHS. Same thing I did with the 94 World Cup. So, I recorded everything. So I still have those VHS somewhere.
Absolutely. I've heard a few stories like that. It kind of feels like a distance away of the time that we're living in with all with all the technology.
Yeah.
But honestly, Rod, you've lived in some good times. I think now it's a bit intense now with all these cameras, AI, technology, and what's going on in the world. We're coming to an exciting time in the next 2 months. We have the next World Cup being hosted in the United States, but a different format. We have 3 countries hosting: Canada, US, Mexico. More teams playing. We have 48 teams. What are your thoughts on the 2026 World Cup that's coming up?
Yeah, it's an exciting time, right? It really is to see everyone sort of, and what's really interesting to me is that it's no longer the people that I would say identify with soccer that are supporting it. I think you have the general sports fan who would be in a category of an involvement in the game in the sense of they like it, but they're not necessarily buying season tickets. They pick up they go to games here and there. It's entertainment. It's not so much about the sport as much it is and the result about hanging out with friends at a game and those kind of things. But I think just the holistic approach of the countries supporting it, because all the way down from top leaders and top businesses to political leaders, they're talking about the game. And so that's really important. It'd be interesting to see the legacy of 2026 World Cup, Will it bring in new fans, or will it simply just elevate the sport and our country to a new level?
Absolutely. You've coached and led at several professional clubs across different countries and competitive levels. Looking at your journey from the Timbers to Sacramento to Montego Bay and Chattanooga, what core leadership principles have remained constant for you over the years?
What I've always tried to do is I've always, as a leader, tried to connect on a personal level. So really create this personal level, create this trust, create um, a level of safety, vulnerability that players feel within the group, which hopefully then, spills over into what happens into on the field. Because something that's really important, leadership is simply dealing with people. It doesn't really matter what tactics you decide to use or what systems you want to play. Those are a little bit less important than actual leading, having emotional intelligence, having connectivity with the players, um, providing psychological safety, providing autonomy, providing all these things. Because then, whatever you select in terms of tactics and techniques, and the players will feel they trust the system and trust what you've said, that then they will perform at their highest level. So for me, building this connectivity, building relationships ultimately fuels and accelerates what happens on the field.
Understood. And in dealing with players building that relationship, everyone and every player is not the same. Do you sense to have to change your communication style dealing with different players, or do you keep your communication level the same with each player?
You have to know what players need. That's absolutely paramount. You have to know personalities. You have to know what motivates. You have to know what cause the players to feel not as comfortable as they would. So um, I think it's real important that you understand your player. So something that I have, in my studies of leadership, I have a master's degree in sports leadership and then working on a PhD in sports leadership. So it used to be that you would say, okay, if you're a transformative leader, you're a servant leader, you are a flexible leader or an adaptable leader, though you master that and you go. I'm believing that you need to be able to, as an emotional, intelligent leader, seamlessly move between sometimes you are function as a transformational leader, sometimes you are function as a servant leader, sometimes you're flexible, sometimes you're adaptable. So I think it is a combination of them all. Do we have our strengths in leadership? Yes, we do. So if you're a servant leadership, that's the one that's your go-to, but you've got to be able to transition into other aspects of leaderships, communication, understanding how to communicate to players and staff and individuals is important.
Understood. I'm just asking for myself as well as for individuals listening in a leadership role. What advice would you give to myself and others listening in regards to leadership?
I would say if I had my number one thing at this moment, my number one idea, my number one theory is emotional intelligence. Being emotional intelligent. What's that mean? Because that's a big word, right? That's two words, right? So emotional intelligence means being empathetic, being self-aware. So these are things that you would have to understand that, self-aware about who you are. I would also say underneath this umbrella of emotional intelligence, your communication level is really important. How to use it, when to say certain things, when not to say certain things. Because underneath emotional intelligence, really understand, it's important to understand that you can say the right thing. It's important to say the right thing at the wrong moment. It is totally different if you say the right thing at the wrong moment because it doesn't really help the situation and the circumstances that are going on. But I would say being empathetic, being self-aware, uh, understanding others, connecting with people as well is really important. But emotional intelligence is key.
Got it. Switching gears, in our prep conversation, you emphasized the need for a holistic, interconnected club model with no silos between technical, tactical, and business operations. How do you define an integrated club structure, and where do most organizations still struggle to achieve it?
Well, yeah, I think the tension that we have in clubs is The business side of the club says we're the driving force behind it. We are without us, the club doesn't exist. And then the technical side of the club says exactly the same thing. So there's this tension between who is the most important, right? And that's not really the question to ask. The question is to ask, how do each of these different, the business and the technical, add value, right? Because let's use some examples. If ticket sales are low, no revenues coming in, sponsors are low, no revenues coming in, uh, no media support, that directly affects how we recruit, what kind of staff we can have on the technical side, how we travel. It affects all those things. So they have a value that they bring that they must, if we use the word the phrase high performance, the business side has to be high performing, has to be high performing, as well as the technical side needs to be high performing. So sometimes we use the phrase high performance and we only think about the business side. I mean, the technical side, but the actuality, that word is all encompassing. Can all the different departments, media, marketing, finance, accounting, ticket sales, perform at a high level to support the technical side? Can the technical side perform at a high level in terms of winning, getting fans to want to come to the game because they like the product? They like the individuals because the individuals are connected to the community. They build and help the sponsorship department sell sponsors. So it's this ebb and flow of this importance of both. It's not an either or. They both are important.
How do you keep a balance between both?
I think that comes down to leadership. I mean, it comes down to a leader understanding that the holistic connectivity, that nothing inside the club is separate from anything, and therefore when you lead each department with the same level of importance, in order to that they feel that they have value and they're adding value and they have the ability to perform at a high level.
You've shared an example of how the front office, in regards to, for example, ticket sales, if ticket sales aren't coming in, how that could affect on the player side. Can you give an example of how the player side could affect the business side?
Well, I mean, if we want to go really the polar opposite and say, if you've got a team of guys that are or players that are always in the news for negative reasons, that will affect the ticket sales. That will affect the sponsors. That will affect what type of media you receive. That will potentially affect your ability to connect within the community.
I remember before we even connected, Rod, before I even got to where I am with One Soccer Nation, seeing you online and seeing you win with Chattanooga, um, you've had a lot of success in your career. But before we go to the success side, I want to ask you personally, what has been first your biggest challenge? I want to start there and then ask you a positive right after.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is really in the lean times of the game, right? When there are very few teams, there is very little financial support, teams folding every year. There was so much uncertainty around, you're trying to make a career in the game, but on the same side of it, right? You're dealing with uncertainty every day. Is the team going to be back? Is the team going to make payroll? Are we going to get to, I mean, the reality, are we going to get to our destination for an away game and the credit card's going to work so we can get in the vans and drive to the hotel, right? Those were realistic things that were happening, in those moments. And so dealing with that uncertainty. But if we take even a personal level about on the game, I would say probably one of the biggest disappointments was one of my times in Chattanooga when I think we won the league. We won the regular season, but we got bounced in the playoffs. Um, we got bounced in the playoffs, and we got a bye, and then the next round we didn't make it to the final, and that was a real disappointment because I mean we led. If you look at it from a modern day data perspective, we led pretty much every attack and carry, excuse me, that there was, and so to come up short, that was really disappointing. We won the league. We won the league, the regular season title, but getting to the playoffs, we didn't finish it off.
Going to the other side, personally for you, what has been the thing that you've kept close to heart in regards to success in your career? What, if you had to choose one thing, what has been your favorite memory in regards to success?
I would say relationships, the relationships with the players. There are players that I coached on my very first team, and I still communicate with those players today. And so those relationships that were built are really, really important. So that relationship building, um, I would say on a just a purely winning was the excitement I think too, winning of the championship as a head coach in 97 and what was some formation of the USL, and then being the assistant head coach in Sacramento when we won the championship in 2014 in the USL at that time. Those are two really, really footballing moments, but the overarching is the relationships that remain intact today.
Absolutely. Sacramento has an exciting new stadium build coming out. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
exciting. I mean, Sacramento, it's a great town, great people. I enjoyed my time there. I mean, I wish they get everything that they want and everything they really do.
100%. Rod, you've created development methodologies that other clubs have adopted and replicated. What are the foundational principles behind your approach to building high-performing players and teams?
My my foundational premise is create a system that any player, when they come into the system and they develop, it doesn't matter where they go, they have the skills to immediately impact and fit into the new system. And I just don't mean sort of the technical and the tactical ideas, but also the mental ideas, the emotional ability to deal with the difficult points. So it's that holistic approach of training players in a way that it doesn't matter where they are, they could still be successful.
During your time as academy director at Sacramento Republic, you oversaw hiring, budgeting, curriculum design, scouting networks, and the pipeline to the first team. What did that experience teach you about creating a youth to pro pathway that is both effective and sustainable?
Yeah, I think that was a really good moment for me in terms of learning because I walk into a situation where there's no academy, there's not one player, there's not one staff. And so you're able to we were blessed enough that I had a lot of lead up time to build, right? It wasn't, okay, we're gonna start academy, 6 weeks later, we gotta select our players. I had months to really prepare this and really taking a very methodical approach to each aspect of it from what was the vision? So the first thing, what was the vision and mission of the academy? The vision and mission of the academy was to create players for the first team. The vision and mission of the academy was to make sure that players who either didn't fit in or simply weren't of the level that we wanted for the first team, but had the ability to go other places to continue their career. Because the reality in every organization, every academy player, good or bad, are not going to either make it, have the ability, or simply not the right fit to be in the first team. So if we look at staffing, I went to find staffing that, and to be honest, that I felt were coaches that were at that level of academy, but they really you could see them going and coaching at a higher level. And two of the academy coaches went on and coached the first team. Oh, those are characteristics that I looked for. Good people, obviously, is paramount. Number one was that. And then looked at the business side, I looked at and I said, leadership, what is it going to take us to develop players? But also because we were an outside team, not an MLS team, what is it going to take us to be competitive on the field? Because we needed the finances to be competitive because, in Sacramento, you got San Jose in the Bay Area, you've got Northern California is probably one of the most developed soccer hotbeds in America. Lots and lots of good players there. So even though you were attached to a pro team, you were still competing with clubs that had 30, 40 years of success, that players that gone on and played professionally, have been in national teams, had gone on to college, right? And so you had to make sure that you had the finances and you had um, the staffing that people would be interested in coming in, and then you were able to recruit that you would have players that would make you immediately competitive. Our first year, we had 14 players going into youth national teams all around the world in year one. So we were doing something right. But yeah, that was really a great time to learn all the different aspects of building from, the budget and having no budget to creating a budget and why this budget is, managing that budget, um, recruitment of players, recruitment um, of staff, even dealing with, um, equipment, buying equipment, merchandising, all these things were all under my direction.
Rod, that's a lot of responsibility and trust that you'd have to have from the ownership group. So how did you get that trust, and how were you able to sustain that responsibility and execute?
Well, I think what helps me too, to some extent, is I've been a lifelong learner, and I would call myself an introvert, that I do a lot of thinking. It's funny, I'm a coach and a leader, but I sort of categorize this. I have enough energy for what I need to get done in those days, and then I need to revert to recharge. So being a lifelong learner, right, I'm always looking at new ways to analyze, to synthesize, to innovate, to do, and then to implement. And that's just a cycle that my brain constantly is in. It's like analyzing things, I'm synthesizing information, I'm trying to innovate, I'm trying to implement. It's just this cycle. But building that trust is being vulnerable and being open and honest to leadership, and really not really hiding who you are. When I'm in a place, I take my whole self to where I am.
That's a big one. What advice would you give to the next generation of individuals that want to become coaches or work within the industry? That was a big piece that you just said. And I'm getting a lot of human aspect of it, right? When you say bring your whole self, what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, that means that when I bring my whole self, right, it means that I'm bringing all of my ability to the office, to the field, but also I'm bringing my vulnerability, that when when ownership or people that manage you ask you questions, you don't have the answer, you say, you know what, I don't have the answer, but I can go find the answer. So that vulnerability, not the person that says I know and then they say explain and then they figure out that you don't know. So you build this level of trust and honesty with leadership and the people that you report to. And even to players, right? I've been in situations where players have said, "Hey, coach, what about this?" And like, I don't have the answer. Let's find that together. And I think that really helps players to say, that he's just like me. Yeah, he might be here, but he's just like me.
It really connects for me, how I'm receiving it really connects always back to that human aspect. And especially in the time that we're living in 2026 with the technology and the AI, it's becoming more and more important for us to stay in touch as humans, and really hone in on that human aspect of it. Um,
Yeah, I really see, we have to be honest where AI is going, right? AI is a very powerful tool that um, moves things forward very quickly, does things that humans do, but do at a much faster pace. But it is this connectivity, connectivity, this human touch. This is one of the reasons why I really feel what I'm doing now in my studies is valuable, not just for now, but for the future. Because, in my studies in leadership, it's not just about theories about leadership, emotional intelligence, what type of leader you are, but it's also the business side, sports economics, sports marketing, sports finance. But the connector is the ability to humanly connect with others. And that is an accelerator on the business side. That is an accelerator on the technical side, is this human connectivity that brings people together to create unity. I didn't say create sameness, create unity. People still have the ability to have different opinions, different ideas, and different, but it doesn't affect our unity.
100%. How many years have you been studying leadership for now?
In a non-formal way, pretty much all my life I've been very involved. But in a formal way, as I said, master's degree and now a PhD in leadership. And it is something that's always driven me, because what I've always wanted to do, what I've always said, even when I first coached youth teams, and it was like, for me, it was, how do I help players be better people and better players than they were when I first connected with them? that's been one of my core pillars. How do I make sure that when I'm finished with a player, that they're better people, that ultimately to being better moms, dads, brothers, sisters, leaders, and how they become a better player. That's always been the driving force for me.
Understood. Just to share a quick story on my side with you, Rod. It's like I'm just thinking back, like growing up, I focusing on the field, there was opportunities where I had to lead, but I was always more so of, okay, let me be the second person in command on pitch. Let me assist. Warm-ups, let me be the second person in line. Let me warm up. On the pitch, I could score a goal, but I'd rather assist, right? Let me assist. That's how I grew up. And then I would say probably around the age of 17, 18, that's when I really took the responsibility to want to be a leader, like to have that feeling like, hey, like I could lead, that confidence, right? So it really takes certain things within a person to want to be a leader, because some people don't. And then
No,
as
they
I've,
don't.
yeah, that's what I've noticed and learned. So the reason I share that story is because throughout time, and especially like, with growing One Soccer Nation, building the brand for the last 8 years since 2018, and really continuing to grow within that leadership role, and even having a team of advisors that are all much older and understanding how to lead OSN in a responsible, respected, trusted way, with experienced advisors assisting us, and how to lead that team with confidence, and to lead properly. So with saying that, leadership is not for everyone. Not everyone chooses to be a leader or wants to be a leader. It does take skill. And you've mentioned a lot of things that leaders need to learn and understand, and apply it. Um, for you, the question is I want to ask you is, how did you know you wanted to be a leader, and why did you choose to be a leader?
I think growing up, right, my dad was always in management type positions. Later on, he became a pastor, but watching him grow up and lead, and he worked for Sears for 35 years, and he came from a simple mechanic. So when he retired from Sears, he was a regional manager. He oversaw most of the stores in North Georgia. So just watching him lead, and actually at that time go to work with him, seeing him his daily. But then also on the field, I always wanted to win, and I always wanted to be the best. So that just kind of really um, drove that leadership. And then for most of my career, I played a striker, and so I always took the responsibility. Hey, give me the ball, and I'll win the game for you. And then that really led into all this other type of leadership that um and I've always tried to come alongside people to help them and guide them, and that's something that I've always done. When and now it's just like leadership. I mean, I don't really separate leadership from anything. Leadership is one of my favorite leadership authors is slipping my mind right now, but one of his sayings is everything starts and ends with leadership, and I believe that wholeheartedly. Everything starts and ends with leadership. Even if you say the barista at Starbucks, everything starts and ends with leadership. They don't realize making that cup of coffee, they are a leader too. How do I say that? Because you get the order, you make that order to the best of your ability. And you when you get that order, you take the lead to make that, right? And so therefore you're leading in that moment. And I'm stretching that a bit, but I believe everything is leadership. I think the foundational premise of success is good people and good leaders. And something that I believe is bad leaders select bad people, good leaders select good people.
Understood. Thank you for sharing. You've often carried dual roles, head coach and technical or sporting director, operating between the pitch and the front office, which is rare in some cases. How has this dual perspective shaped the way you elevate talent, manage staff, and make club-wide decisions? This is not an easy task. It does take talent and skill.
And it goes back to what I said, that tension between the office and and the technical side. I've realized that they both are important. They both are additives. They're not subtractors, right? Sometimes people in the office might feel like the technical staff is subtractors because you don't see them very much. They spend a lot of money, right? They're not winning games. And then the technical side might see we only have 50 people at the game, or whatever they see as a negative, and they're not getting the things that they want, and they think it's down to the business side not having the dollars and finances to do so. Um, so for me, it's about not seeing any separation, seeing that they're together. So when I make a decision understanding the impact on everything, not the impact. If it's a business decision saying, let's spend, we're going to recruit this guy and we want to spend, we're only budgeted $1, but we want to spend $3 on this player. Now, as the sporting director, I've got to say, I got to look at the budget and say, how will this affect all the other things? And then what I have to say is giving this player this amount of money upsetting the balance within the team, that players who've been there longer making less, how will that impact them, and so it's really just, and then ultimately, you have to settle on, am I making the best decision that I can for the most people? And I think that's really what helps me, is like, am I making the best decision that impacts and helps and supports most people? If you do that, I think people see that and the people support you, and you find yourself with less challenges.
Absolutely. 100%. Switching gears, at Montego Bay United, you restructured the academy, built new transfer strategies, and aligned player development with broader club objectives. What insights did you gain about connecting football identity with business strategy in an emerging market?
Yeah, that was challenging because, obviously going into a market and going to a market like that, but then also going into a team that was very successful. I think they had won 2 league championships in the last 3 years or something, and they had gone very far in the early stages of what is now called CONCACAF Champions League. It was called something different at the time. So they'd had a lot of success, but most of the players had come from outside of the club, so from around the island and from outside of the country. Um, and so what we wanted to do is build this academy where players would have a pathway to the pro game. And that's really something in developing nations and emerging markets, is that sometimes football is the only way out. And so when you talk about connecting to your community, it's beyond just the player making it the first team. It is the ripple effect of this player making it, receiving dollars for this, helping their families, and in markets like that, also helping the community. So if you develop this academy and individual players can come through there making the first team and then ultimately moving into higher leagues around the world, this is such an effect on the club, the individual player, the individual player's family, and the community, and even to the point of the country at large, because it's inspirational to see someone from your country, and especially emerging markets, developing nations. They've made it. They've come out. Now I have a chance. That goes to that representation is important, right? And seeing things that you want to accomplish is important. So I believe that was really important, but it was the same methodology that I've used anywhere. Is how do I create players and create individuals that are better than they were when they first connected with me, so that this holistic approach to being able to transition anywhere. That is sort of one of the methodology frameworks and foundational principle that I really harp on.
Coming back to the United States, in Chattanooga, your team won the 2023 regular season championship. What were the non-negotiables, from staff selection to daily training to culture, that allowed you to build a winning and consistent environment?
Non-negotiable is good people, right? So something that I did in the recruitment phase was, when I spoke to players, there were very personal questions asked, like, what was your home life like? How did you grow up? What were the challenges that you faced? What were some of the positives that you faced? How did you deal with those challenges? So it wasn't about, like, because my recruitment philosophy is that we're not even having a conversation if your technical acumen and your tactical acumen aren't already at a certain level. So we're not even having a conversation. So once I figure out that who you are as a person and how you add value as a person, then the recruitment of the player is easier. So it's good people make better players. And I firmly believe that. I mean, yeah, there are outliers out there that are, that are not great people, but they reach high levels. But when you open the book, you realize the trauma and the challenges that they face throughout life, which for me personally, it's not worth sacrificing the club for those situations.
You've coached and mentored players who have gone on international stages, including World Cup environments. When ident- and cut. When identifying talent, what separates a player who can excel at the highest level from one who can only compete professionally?
Well, what I look at is I always tell my staff and recruitment, and now obviously things are different because we have data and we have data that creates a group of players, and we look at these players. But something that I still look for is I look for things. One of the key elements for me is I look at players and say, "Wow, they did that." And for me, when I see that, I say that comes from their own personal inspiration. It doesn't come from what a coach has taught them. So I look for things that players can do that does not look like a coach has provided that information. Maybe the coach has helped them to shape it, make it better, but in terms of seeing a player do things that other players can't do and understanding that those things that a player is doing were not simply being coached by the player, being told to them by the coach. And so that's really a big important. Now, we know that data is really important and it creates some safety and it creates you finding players because all of us would create player profiles, player data profiles, we create all of those things. And that's what has made the game so much closer and brought teams that couldn't compete for titles that can compete for titles because in a general sense, we all have access to the same data these days. It's what you do it and how you implement it, how you use it and how you implement it. Um, and analyze it that really separates. And then for me, it's looking at players. Are they doing things that no other player is doing, nor has a coach been able to teach them to do that?
You mentioned data. Obviously, from the time that you started coaching to now, technology has evolved. Is there a point where there's too much technology in the beautiful game? There's too much data?
I do believe right now there's a lot of data. And I do believe right now some of the data is not helpful. But on the flip side of that, I believe data is really important. I really believe that data is very valuable. However, I would say that within a club, we really need to figure out what data is important to us and where we want to. Once we figure out what data is important to us, we can start to push away some of the data that's less important to us, and that will help us shape the team and grow the team. Because again, when I said earlier that it doesn't really matter what system or tactics you select, the leadership and the interpersonal connectivity and the empathy and the self-awareness and the ability to effectively communicate will elevate the data that you do decide to use within your organization. But I do believe that in sport and in life, we are a society of we don't want to get left behind. So we take on more. It's kind of like I was speaking with a mental performance coach, and something I realized a while back was that when things started getting tough and the game was important, I was doing more work, which in turn led to less work because there was no rest in between. And that's much like we tell players, right? Recovery is one of the most important things you do. Sleep, eat, those things will help you be at your best. I think that's the same thing we need to think about data is that more is not necessarily better. The right amount of data and the right data is what's best.
Well said, Rod. For club owners, executives, and operators listening, what are the essential ingredients required to build a truly sustainable professional soccer club today? And where should their focus and investments actually go in order to build longevity?
Long-term sustainable football clubs need to make sure that that the leadership is right. That the leadership is right. Not just the executives, but all the way down to, the line manager or, that's really important The vision, the mission, that needs to be communicated every day, all the time, in most every conversation. Where we miss things is that because there's such a revolving door in professional sports on the team side and on the business side, that we have one or two meetings and we share the vision, we share the mission, we share where we want to go, then we don't reshare it. But what we need to do is make sure that it is embedded in all of the conversations and all of the material, that it never slips away. That's building culture, right? That's building culture. But I think you need to invest in people and leadership. If you invest in people and leadership with the right vision and mission statement, you can build these other things. So in other words, let's take a stadium, because you talk a lot about stadium. If we just put a stadium 20 miles outside of the city, how much revenue stream are we going to get on 25 days? Not much. But can we build apartments? Can we build coffee shops? Can we build um, restaurants that create these other revenue streams plus that? So I think, again, right, for investors, it needs to be looked at people first, vision, people meet our vision and mission, business, meaning how does the business side, revenue generation, affect our mission, affect our people. It shouldn't be let's get the business, the mission, the business, the revenue generating, and then worry about the people later. I think you get that, and then you build this.
Why is it first to think about why is it important to think about people first?
Because people will create the revenue. People will create the revenue streams. People will create the marketing opportunities. People will create the media opportunities. People will create um, the naming rights opportunity for the stadium, which at the high levels can be billions of dollars, right? So I think those things are paramount, because if you have people committed to the vision and the mission, and they have autonomy, and they have clarity, and they have psychological safety, this I it just thinking about that right now, it's like, wow, this could be unbelievable. It could go to the point where you never thought it could go.
I
But
mean,
saying all that, you can't have a professional club without money. you you again, that's kind of like me talking about recruitment. Why am I talking to a player who doesn't have the technical level to be in the team? Why is there even a conversation with individuals that don't have the finances to, to fund a team? So the finances are a given. If that's there, great. If it's not there, there's no conversation. No need to worry about people. Need to worry about the vision, because it doesn't come together. So it's important that we have this baseline, that the ownership, the finances reach a minimum standard. From there, that minimum standard can be exponentially grown through good people who feel well taken care of, who feel that their abilities are believed in, and they're allowed to use their abilities to exponentially grow the business.
understood. I mean, it's a great point that has been brought up in I think every single conversation that I've had in regards to club ownership is of importance of community. How important community is to a club. It's you need both. You need both for it to work for sure.
Well, it's like this. Imagine building a stadium, right? And if we look at a stadium on face value, it's there to host games, concerts, is there to provide an opportunity for the club. But I would argue that you have to look at it from a different lens. And the lens should be is the stadium is a unifier of the community. Because if you build this quality stadium, you're creating, and the community is looking at this. This is turning into be a better place to work, live, and play. You By building this stadium, you're improving my life. And then you have players, then you have community identifying with the team, with the organization. What does that mean? They are emotionally attached to the team. They are emotionally attached to the organization. That creates stability. That creates sustainability. So I think we have to view things not just financially, but also how does it make the community feel? How does it make us feel? How does it create unity for the community?
Absolutely. Rod, thank you for sharing your insights, experience, and the unique perspective you've gained from decades in the game. Your holistic approach to leadership development, and club sustainability is invaluable for anyone building or operating within professional soccer. To everyone tuning in, thank you for joining us on this episode of the One Soccer Nation podcast. I hope you found today's conversation insightful and actionable as we continue exploring what it takes to build and sustain successful professional soccer clubs. If you'd like to learn more or get involved, feel free to reach out. Until next time, let's keep growing the beautiful game. Thank you, Rod.
Thank you.